question is more like, what are the next steps? Because there have been several things along the way, like, you know, like the decision to label the death as an accidental drowning, but all the evidence goes against that. So, we've recently gotten, not just autopsy reports, but photos and things that were told to the family do not align with sort of the background information that a lot of families probably have.
Something fishy.
Right. It's, you know, it's like against like that process and what, like, how do we put those biases aside to say, like, you know, this should care about what he brings to the table. What is that going to look like, right? Like when he comes up with maybe a conclusion that's different than that initial ruling, how is the case going to be opened? And so you shared one example of that.
Okay, yeah, and that was, again, what was the?
So usually it's reopened through the law enforcement agency.
The same one that handled the case?
So they have to be involved because they're the keeper of all the records. And that's why sometimes it's using other mechanisms or means to help persuade them or convince them to reopen that case, or bringing that evidence forward. I was involved in opening a case from the 90s that was a cause of death issue. And that's what it was. It was just that sometimes the changing of the faces of the investigators, you know, looking for a new challenger, but that agency does have to be involved.
Can I ask a follow-up question with that? Just because you have a lot of experience in this working in law enforcement agency, I think what we worry about is maybe this is an obstacle, the resistance. Is that same agency going to be willing to do that, or is that going to be sort of like, that's going to look bad on them because there was so much resistance?
That's definitely an obstacle. There's no doubt about it. That's definitely an obstacle with all these cold cases. Even when we looked at this or we looked at our case from the 1980s, it was going back to what the investigators did back. And you're like, well, we're just double checking work.
Right.
You know, so no, absolutely, that's definitely an obstacle that we're all cognizant of, and sometimes we have to find the best way to solve it, and that's why it's collaboratively with all the players involved.
For that, you know, I think what you guys have been doing with Katie, that's the right thing to do. You're making noise in the community. You've got a beautiful new memorial for Joshua, which is amazing. But I think an approach will help. Like hearing, you know, something happens to your son, and you feel that it was a miscarriage of justice, how it was handled. If you go in there, you know, no pun intended, guns blazing, like, I'm angry, you messed up.
Yeah.
They're not gonna, nobody would, like, they don't want egg on their faces, but to go in there and say, my son deserves justice, you know, we've got this expert who has this opinion, please just take a look and have a conversation with us. This isn't, in your eyes, it's not closed, and you know, like, show them that, like, we're not, this case isn't closed for us. But I definitely think approach, and I think tactics are gonna really be.
I think there's a new law though too with cases like this, isn't there, Kate, a new law that say, what was that? Yeah, with new evidence, right, that they have to reopen the case.
Yeah, so I think that's where Detective Gannon can really be your ally with this, you know, whatever he comes up with, it would be helpful to say, hey, look, there's a difference of opinion here,
Yeah.
please take a look.
I will say too that brings up another obstacle in my mind related to forensic death investigations, and that the nature of forensic death investigations differs in New York State from county to county. How they do it and the completing the death investigation differs depending on which county your body is found in. And I think when we think about avenues for where we can try to make a difference, trying to get some more guidelines in place, and this isn't just a New York State thing, this is across the entire country, right? Depending on where you die, who investigates your death is gonna differ, and their certifications and qualifications are going to differ, and I think that's a problem that we can try to work on, and, you know, a place for advocacy as we think about, if the death investigation doesn't give us the thing we're looking for, then the people are gonna stop looking. And I know there was a thing in the newspaper recently about Baltimore having a whole bunch of undetermined deaths that now they're not being investigated as a homicide because they're listed as undetermined, and concerns about, you know, the death investigations and who's conducting those.
I mean, that can be really subjective.
Very good. Another question? Go ahead.
Sort of piggybacking off my last question, but a little bit more specific to the actual, like the law side and then once you have a suspect. What's to stop, I mean, I guess, actually, we give some context first. I mean, I'm an undergraduate biology student, here in Siena, and, I have done, PCR, I've used Aspirite and Essence, both able to with very limited resources, although obviously Siena has a lot of resources, but, it seems like a forensic lab, and I've been able to, create and edit DNA. And so what's to stop, somebody, when, the defendant in the court of law from saying, oh, you know, like, yes, you have my DNA, but this DNA was created by someone, or this DNA was edited by someone to look like mine. I mean, with these new, technologies, isn't that a probable barrier to conviction once you do, catch somebody?
When I heard your question, I thought it was a CRISPR question, so I was like, is that what he's asking about? Do we edit DNA? I think, Adam has the answer, he gave it before, and Toby did too, it's not the only thing. And so when we look at, for example, the Gilgo Beach, that is not, the DNA is not the only thing that the Suffolk County DA has listed that links this person to this crime, right? There is extensive other information, and it made sense, and he's currently a suspect, he's not convicted, but they're not trying him only on his DNA, and so it's the kind of the last piece of the puzzle to be able to say, okay, it makes sense, this person was in the area, they might have, they have this history, they were associated with this person, what have you, and we have the DNA. It's not, here's your DNA.
There's also checks and balances with the labs that run that. They have to be accredited labs, and that's some of the issue that comes up and overlaps with the cases, and the obstacles that we face with those tests, in that previously certain labs had to be certified by the New York State Department of Health. There's testing, requirements, peer review of all processes. It's not just like, not compared to your example, but a person working in a lab is like, the result is, it's John Smith. There's peer review that has to go into that, outside analysts look at it, multiple people are involved in that. We're not dismissing the possibility that there are people that do things nefariously in any profession, but at the same time, there's so many levels that are involved into it, accreditation levels, standard levels, and checks and balances and review that goes into it. It kind of removes a lot of those elements and makes it extremely difficult.
I agree with that. Good question. We have another question back there?
Hi, I was wondering a couple of things too. I'm wondering how, I'm here because I, saw a lot of things on Facebook. That was a big, motive, like outreach that I was seeing and educating myself with. And so the 518 bail was really, something that I became involved with as a community member. And so I'm wondering how we can strengthen partnerships and ties and also to help dispel like myths like having to wait over 24 hours to report somebody missing, or how to inform the community in a trauma-informed way. As we've said, when maybe remains are found, it does cause, maybe trauma to someone or bring them back to a place, that can bring up a lot of feelings for them. So I'm wondering how, other than, I'm seeing a lot from Saratoga County for Facebook of like, releases of information, the 518 bail. I know we talked about like podcasts and stuff, but I'm wondering how other ways within the capital region, I know we're a very tight-knit community, as much as we say, there's ways, people know each other, like you were even mentioning that one case was related to someone here at Siena and their family. And so I think, what we're doing now is going to bring a lot of people together in a lot of different ways. And I think this is a really great example of what communities can do to strengthen their communication between police and the community members, and then also like the feelings people feel in the weight of grief and someone missing and even potentially someone who was murdered. And so that's my one part. And I also had another question of, I know some cases were solved by looking at data analytics of people checking Facebook, of like how often they're going, on what dates they're going to see, and checking like patterns of, like their behavior of what they're searching and how long they're looking at pictures and certain profiles. I'm wondering if that is something that is, one, legal, and two, like here in New York State, and two, something that might be that is being utilized in the capital region, if anybody knows about that. Thank you.
Can we do your second one first?
Absolutely.
Oh, I need to recap on the first one. No, that's okay. So the use of maybe, social media patterns and information, is that kind of like in general?
Yeah, just not even specific to Facebook. just in general.
Yeah, okay. So the question is about, when there is this rich, area of social media, that could, possibly provide information and intelligence to a criminal case, is that currently being used? And then if not, could it be? What do you guys think?
About, the legality of using like time spent on social media and reviewing things, and the legality of that.
So people may have a different opinion, but if the judge will sign a subpoena or search warrant for it, we can get it. I mean, I hate to say that, but it's, it's obtained through legal means. It's not like we just go on there and look at your Facebook page or something, or see how somebody searched it. It's obtained through a court order, which is reviewed by a judge. And there's a lot of different ways to investigate stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll let them answer that part.
I was gonna say, historically, they would do things like go to the funeral and see who shows up there and start identifying people this way. With social media, right, that gets harder. Under a subpoena, that all can be reviewed, and, there's a good amount of technology that allows for the review of that in a pretty systematic way. That doesn't involve having to pay through it all, although sometimes that is what we're doing as well, so. As far as how do we strengthen partnerships, there you go.
Kind of values, just reach out to the detectives and officers and whoever's willing to speak. Like then talking to, obviously not telling everybody everything, but there's people you can tell who you can trust, and I just feel like it will help solve, maybe not solve, but bring a lot of cases further if law enforcement starts opening up more to, advocacy pages or just people doing the work that I'm doing. It definitely has helped with a few of these cases for sure. Leileen's case, Barry's case, the detective for her case is incredible, absolutely incredible. He tells me everything that I need to know. We exchange information, we bounce ideas off each other, I tell him things and he'll go and see if it, lines up with what he's got before he even tells me. Just stuff like that, but I definitely think that law enforcement, I don't want to be gatekeepers, because I understand some things are very important to keep to the chest, but we definitely should be working on some type of, better communication, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think, in terms of, I was gonna say before, sorry to pick on you guys, but you were there. Family advocacy is really, really important, and I've dealt with a lot of different families of, missing persons and of crime victims, and I'd like to think I've made a connection with all of them, and every case is obviously different, but if you, yourself as a family member, can't speak out, it's important to have people like Jess who speak out for justice for Julie Greenwalker. People like Kayleen and I that can take these cases and blast them to a larger audience, because I can't imagine being one of these family members that I talk to. I almost always end up in tears, and let me do it again. But it's just, they need someone to talk about it, because yes, the police care, but they're busy. They have current crimes, they have other things that they are working on. Hearing about these cases and seeing them keep coming up, I believe something's gonna happen with Joshua's case, because how can it be ignored at this point? It's everywhere. And I've had people reach out to me from as far down as New York City, I've had people reach out to me from Massachusetts, and they're like, hey, it's been years, we don't know who to reach out to or how to reach out, can you do it for us? And I'm like, of course, I don't know this police agency, but I'll send them an email, like, I will be that voice for you. So I think it's just finding those places and those people in the community that can be that voice.
And sometimes it is about just having somebody who will send an email, so, you know, I know a specific case where somebody came to me and said, hey, it'd be really helpful if we could work on that. And I sent the email and folks were like, that's great, because, you know, the police are busy and I have resources and these, you know, like you're saying, interns are very excited and enthusiastic to be able to assist in any way that they can. And so sometimes it's a matter of just, hey, I have this resource available, would you be interested in partnering with us? So yeah, reaching out to as many people as possible, you know, who can partner and who can ask which questions and whom.
Yeah, I'd like to also just kind of add on to that, the word partnership she used and collaboration. In 2025, it's kind of a crazy world, right? The younger people that are, you know, coming in through Siena University, I said, I was on TV last night, and I said, did you see me? And they were like, we don't watch TV. So there's a new kind of talking, a new kind of communication, and yesterday during my television interview, I called it like third-party communication. And so sometimes family find it a little easier to, you know, be like, with me. And I don't take it, right? It's not my fault, but I can be like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. So maybe there's a space now that we're kind of creating that hasn't existed before, you know, that is full of information. And maybe it's not like the buttoned down, tight, confirmed, confidential information, but maybe it's like the beginning of that. And so I'm excited about that, and I think you're touching upon that now too, and the presence of what you guys do, it's valuable and it has a place. And the words that we're using now are partnership and collaboration, but there's something there, which is good. Great question. Did we cover everything for you?
Yeah, I think I'm also wondering, like, what can we do preventatively, like, to have a stronger tie with law enforcement and the community? Like, I think this is absolutely a great step in the right direction, of just creating the space that we're acknowledging that this is happening in our communities and, you know, to our neighbors and the people that are, you know, living day to day. So I'm also wondering, with obviously confidentiality of certain things, you have to hold tight to the chest, but like, how I feel, and I'm wondering other people too, not even just the panel, of how you feel like it would be helpful to receive information or like help strengthen ties in your maybe specific community. But I'm also, in my full-time role, I'm here as a community role, I work for a crime victim services agency. And so I think I do a lot of prevention ed across the Capital Region, and I think just like having those ties before it happens, because we are talking to people in the worst, potentially the worst moment of their life. How do we strengthen those relationships before this happens so they feel more comfortable sharing these things with you in this time of very desperate need, and also human devotion. So I am just curious if, you know, I think this is just something I want to put out there, not necessarily saying right now we have to have all those answers, but that's what in this space.
So I think what you're asking is how can we get that partnership and collaboration to happen fast? Happen faster.
Not necessarily, just more in a more effective, not more effective way, just in a way that, like, I think we know the needs, like, this is a community that knows the needs, and I think it's maybe having, how do we match the language of law enforcement and the community so that we're speaking the same language, because we're doing the same thing, like similar things. And obviously, there's laws and things that are holding certain people back in law enforcement to share certain things, but how can we ease the process of sharing that information? I don't know, I guess that's really my thought.
Yeah.
I think it's events like today. I mean, just the fact that you look at this panel, and it's made up of people with all different backgrounds, educations, specialties, building that network. And the fact that we have this panel, this background, we've communicated on other stuff since it, I mean, there was a case that just happened in Albany this week, some of you may have seen on the news. I reached out to Toby about it to ask for specialty service that was needed because we already have that connection. You know, so it's building that Rolodex of getting everybody involved before the incident happens and having this at the table. Hey, I have a connection at Jalen Simpson, I have a connection at SUNY, I have a connection with, you know, to be able to do that. Thoughts?
When I think too, some of the stuff that you were talking about with prevention education, like better messaging around, if you have a person who is missing, it's not 24 hours. If you have a person who is missing and they engage in a certain kind of work or they are of a transit, they still matter and you should still report them because we need to start the clock on when we last saw them. And, you know, all of us who hang out in true crime kind of know that, but not everybody hangs out in that space. And so helping the general public know more about it, you know, here's what you can do and how quickly you can report that something's a concern. And even if, you know, it turns out to be something a little bit later, you call back like, I'm so sorry, I found this person and everything's fine. I think, you know, helping people understand that part of that process, if you legitimately think someone's missing, then call it in, and that, you know, there aren't those waiting periods like there used to be, or there's perceived to be. And other things about that kind of education as well.
And things like this, like I'd love to chat with you afterwards.
Just a quick note on that, because it's one of my favorite things to talk about, people that go missing of a transient lifestyle or of a certain group or, I sometimes specifically look for those cases because, there's a crazy statistic where like 1% of people that go missing actually had foul play or were like kidnapped or abducted. A lot of people go missing because of the circumstances of their life and then often meet foul play afterwards. But if someone is missing and people are looking for them, it doesn't matter what they were doing, where they were living, who they were hanging out with. Someone is looking for them, like they're missing. People don't know where they are. Like we need to find them. We need to talk about them. So I think it's important, no matter what you know or who you know, or hey, I haven't heard from so and so in a while. Maybe I should reach out. Maybe I should see if anyone else has heard from them. Because everyone matters.
That's what's up.
All right, let's have some more talk, some questions. Christian, and then you, Frank. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm curious, like, you know, I mean, everyone sees cases, somebody, you know, they didn't get new advice, and then it goes on for like a long time before they do genetic genealogy. I'm curious of why is it sometimes takes so long before like law enforcement seeks out like help, maybe a third party.
I have an opinion. It's a couple of reasons. So that's a problem right there. So one reason could be education or just exposure. Some agencies, this is just what I have learned, right? They're tucked away, they don't really watch like what's happening like a coastline away. You know, they're like a little bit smaller, you know, so that can be one thing. You know, they're not learning about these brand new things that are happening, right? So they're a little bit behind the curve in the, you know, like modern testing, for example. So that can be one thing. Busyness is another huge problem. So with what I know we can do with cold cases, we need to quadruple the law enforcement personnel. That's how many people we need to work on all of the cold cases that we can test, you know, the DNA on and provide a lead. Those leads, as a genetic genealogist, when I find the guy or whatever, when I find the person and I turn that lead over, you know, a lot of the law enforcement agencies are short-staffed, and you know, there's people retiring, right? There's always kind of a transition, promotion, like that, and that's all good and everything. But I mean, this is a silent mass disaster, everyone. I hope you see that there's like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of cases in New York alone. Every state has them that need to be solved And if we get a couple of them going, that's really cool and everything, but, then there needs to be, follow-up, it has to be, like that case that I talked to you about, or a little earlier, I introduced in, New Mexico. They're swamped, they're so swamped. She tries her best, the detective, but she just got promoted, and then there was like, I know she's on the beat, like she's being assigned, she has a stack of current cases. So that is a huge problem, and I don't know how to get around that problem. But the nice thing is that we're doing it like one at a time, and that's beginning to loosen up. So there's hope out there. I think another thing that was important for law enforcement was to see that genetic genealogy and other kinds of modern technology in toxicology and stuff like that, that they're just going away. They're totally changing, right? The landscape is completely different to navigate for crime scenes. And then you have to take all of your 30-year-old cold case and then, shine this like 2025 light. Like there's just no staff for that, right? It's just, so we're just plugging forward one at a time. And then everyone is just gonna see, probably, hopefully, that it's an issue of staffing, and as long as we can, keep increasing the numbers, we can carry the investigations forward. Good, Christian? Yeah.
What I was gonna say too, not just law enforcement resources, but lab resources. So not everybody who works in a lab is considered law enforcement, but in New York State, as I mentioned, they have to be a certified lab to be able to be used for criminal prosecution purposes. Those labs have a backlog. There's no denying that. And so it might take a while to get to the point where they have the content to do the forensic investigative genetic genealogy, because it just takes that long to test it too.
Resources and money are the two things. And one of the things that a great solution would be a call to action from some of our legislature and seeing them allocating some funding for things like this. It's great, we have new programs like Siena University, I got it, coming out and starting programs. This program didn't exist when my friends from high school and my wife went here years ago, and now they do. And that's a good prelude to get into these other professions that are all needed for this, not just police officers or law enforcement. And getting that resources from the legislature, but also passing these laws to make other things easier, to allow us to get over some of those hurdles. But there's a number of investigators in this room, and the number of cases that they have and the amount of resources to even get them to be able to be here on a Friday evening, shows the dedication that they have towards the cases that they're working on. But I would conjure a bet in the 2 hours of this presentation, they couldn't list all their active investigations through this.
And then you had a question?
So, one of the things I was thinking about during this whole lecture is, how come we don't utilize Amber Alerts at all? Just like, I remember like they came out around when I was in 6th grade, now I'm a freshman in Siena, and like I probably already seen 2 out of this like whole time that I've seen develop. So can you at least like walk me through the processes of how Amber Alert even generates?
So the question came in about the decrease in the interest in, or the use of Amber Alerts.
So there's like very specific criteria to set off an Amber Alert, and I've actually interviewed some local legislators who are working to expand that and to change that, because like they have to be witnessed like being abducted, it's this crazy, they have to believe to be in danger, there's all these boxes you have to check in order to send out an Amber Alert, and even then it's like a localized or it's a regional, not everyone in New York State gets an Amber Alert if someone disappears in Albany. It's the zones and the regions, and it's complicated, but they do use them, it's just not always as frequently as we think it should be.
I think the big distinction is the difference for an Amber Alert and a missing person. If we were to send out an Amber Alert on every missing person case and send it to the capital region, the public would be desensitized immediately. I mean, Saratoga County, how many missing persons have you guys had in the last 24 hours?
At least 3.
Yeah. in 24 hours. Okay? And that's one police agency in the capital region. So if an Amber Alert was used on every one, people aren't gonna pay attention to that alert when they get it on their phone. And there is very strict criteria that we in law enforcement have to follow the law as well. So that's one of our obstacles too.
Thank you. I mean, it was kind of an answer. Yeah, okay. Okay, go ahead.
If you had to estimate, because I know everything's a spectrum, right? What's the price tag on solving a cold case? So we're talking about resources, we're talking about staffing. So on average, like what are we talking about? If we have thousands and thousands of cases to solve, how much does each case cost? What is the price tag on solving those cases hypothetically?
Right, I have an answer to this. The people at Cold Case Foundation, I chat with them every once in a while. I'm on their list as a resource for genealogy, and so we'll talk sometimes about their cases that have DNA. He estimates every time so once it's established as a cold case, you know, after a few years, right, no more leads, you are to bring it out, open it out every so often. When that happens, $20,000. And so, by contrast, if a case is cold and it has DNA in there somewhere that could be tested, it's cheaper to test it than to keep it cold. It's cheaper to solve a case than to keep it cold. That's a great question. Thank you for asking. You want to add any more to that?
I mean, when you start thinking of all the personnel hours that goes into them, we just made a call this week about familial DNA, or I'm sorry, forensic investigative genealogy, and the price tag was $15,000. That's just to run that test. When you start putting in all the personnel hours to work on the case, do interviews, do all those, it's, I don't want to say the best answer is no answer, but, and it's different for every case, but it's a large ask, and that's why, you know, the resources go into it, like we said, with all the cases occurring now. That's why we go to prevent things from getting cold. You know, prevention, we talked about, what's a, you know, a step to curing a problem is prevention. So if we can prevent those cases from getting cold through this collaborative process or the other processes by the diversity of the team we have up here, we can prevent that from happening and save money.
Go ahead.
What
Oh,
should be-
sorry, one more second.
Sure.
Just want to say a quick thank you to the Zoom audience, because we're going to close that discussion down. And then we want to wrap up here within the next 15 minutes too, right? So if you have a question, we'll get it in. Go ahead.
What should be the process of an unattended drowning death? And what resources should we utilize? Should,
Not the area.
So, any unattended death, it varies, like was mentioned earlier, on the county. And to elaborate on the county, that people are talking about the differences in New York State, some counties use the coroner system, which is an elected official, to determine the cause of death. Other counties use the medical examiner system, which is somebody that's certified in forensic death investigation. So that's one of the processes. And then it's going through the investigative steps of, you know, interviews, video, you know, what are the circumstances of the person going missing initially to start with, the autopsy, the results that come up at that autopsy. I mean, it's a variety of those steps going into place, but securing all that information and everything as soon as possible.
Do you know if these kinds of protocols are available to the public, like for a law enforcement agency?
I do know there is a list of which system which counties use, so whether they use a coroner system or medical examiner system, or they contract out to a pathology lab to do them. That information is available, but exactly what their process is for unattended death, particularly unattended drowning, gosh, it might be in somewhere, and it might be in the law, but because it's gonna vary so much county to county, it would take a little bit of digging to be able to give you, it's a very unsatisfactory answer to say right now, kind of depends. And we can talk about that more, because I think somebody looking at some of those laws right now.
Okay, hang on one second. Just wanted to mention that after this, we're all gonna kind of head out that way. through the lobby, there's a lot of information that you can grab at tables, flyers. Check out the posters. You can donate to some of these cases that we're currently working at DNA Finders. And also, I really want to talk to a few of you, so I just wanted to say that. There's networking right after we leave. Also, I would like to add some more cold cases over here. Does anybody have a specific case tonight that they would like to log as a case that needs attention? Yeah.
Her name is Audrey Heron. She lived in Catskill. She went missing, I believe, like 30-something years ago. I'm
Yeah.
not really too sure of the number.
Yeah.
But she was, leaving work one night, and she takes the same route home every day. And her car and her just vanished, never to be seen again.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's talk. Any other names that we can add to our list? And also remember that the interns are looking to, start a project on these particular cases to see if they can get them up to 2025 technology standards. Okay, there was a question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I know the field of forensic is growing, and I was hoping that individuals could sort of address their experience with it and maybe some technologies.
I didn't hear the second word. I heard forensic and then I couldn't hear the second.
Odontology.
Odontology. Whoa. I'm going. I'm buying. Enjoy.
Restate your question really fast.
I was just hoping that
Oh, big time.
developments in forensic odontology.
Okay. Send it to Estrella Lab for sequencing.
Well,
So, odontology, yeah, make sure it's on.
There you go.
So forensic odontology was a fad many years ago. And it was the way to go for the investigators in the room. And now there's been a lot of science and work done to disprove a lot of its credibility. Personally, and just garnering for the views of the other law enforcement in the room, it's not something that is much weight put into as previously was. Finding dental records and results is one thing, but the actual work of that and using that in comparison is not something that you usually elaborate.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's two different ways to look at it, right? So there's using forensic odontology to convict someone. No. I'm gonna go no. Somebody else can fight me on that later. Using forensic odontology to identify unidentified human remains, that has some ability, right? So you'll hear people being identified by their dental records for human remains. So there's two different ways to think of forensic odontology. One is just to be able to identify someone. That is still a legitimate way to use information about someone. And then if they have DNA in it, you don't have dental records, but there's DNA in the root of the tooth, and we can send it to Toby and she can take care of that. All of that's related to the identification of a human body, not for prosecution purposes.
And we can use any part of the tooth.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, you better on that part. You just come get another degree.
Yeah, there's,
No.
when I'm teaching Introduction to Forensic Science, there's like chapters in the book and I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, let's just get through this. But they're historical, right? Odontology is one of them. And in a specific case, it might be very important, right? So it's good to know about it. Knowing a good pollinologist, like if you find, some remains or a body and there's pollen on it, right? You could have analysis done on that, right? Or a botanist, someone has, foliage around them. That might help solve the case, right? So it's important to have maybe someone in the Rolodex. I liked that. That was cute. That's an old word.
Yeah, I dated myself with
Rolodex,
This is a modern Rolodex.
Oh my gosh. But anyway, so how I get around that at Siena University is that, the first class is like, there's 21 chapters in this book. Let's just walk through it and learn a little bit about everything, and most of it's historical. And then when I teach criminalistics, and there's a big lab with it, we only study what is done at the Forensic Investigation Center for the New York State Police. So that's like DNA, toxicology, drug analysis, fingerprints, ballistics, thank you, firearms. Thank you, Sarah.
And arson,
Arson.
I think big stuff is going away.
Is it?
Yes.
I mean, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna talk to you after this, too. I mean, but, okay, I heard that was, yeah, they were wondering about.
But I kind of agree with what Dr. Hughes said about odontology, as someone who's worked in the field in criminalistics and working with the specialists and stuff like that. I think it's a great tool for identifying those John and Jane Does for sure. But as far as, it's so subjective when it comes to putting a suspect to the findings.
I think the biggest thing now is that a bite mark would tell you there might be some saliva DNA there
Yes,
and want to swab
that's
it,
right.
right? Not that you need to use those dental impressions to try to get somebody to bite a sandwich and see if it's the same impression.
Yeah.
And I say that because if you go on to the Innocence Project website and look at how many false convictions there have been related to some of that forensic odontology.
Well, I think it goes back to the NAS report, too,
Yes.
2009,
That
the
too.
subjectiveness of forensic science back then and what we're trying to do to improve the field with the testing and, every lab across the country that are accredited, making sure they have the same standards.
Yeah, so a bite mark is great, there could be some good DNA there, not, we're gonna use that for the bite mark itself for conviction.
Very good. Another Siena University forensics teacher right here in the house. Last few questions before we adjourn. Okay. Yes.
I got here late, so I don't know if you talked about the older couple that was just recently found. And how did that happen? How did they find it? Wow.
Adam?
It's
It's been a busy week for Adam.
That's very important too.
Yes, we don't want to dismiss the intricate role News 6 played in this investigation. It is a very unique case. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, and some people know I very rarely say there's not a lot I can say. We can't get into all the details of it, but it was publicly released. The case was initiated by the United States Social Security Administration, going to verify the fact that these checks were being cashed and they were unable to contact these individuals. That's what initiated the investigation back in May. Then there was a joint investigation between the Albany Police Department, the State Police, and our office, and the District Attorney's office, to get to the point of what took place this week.
Well done.
That goes back to that social security question though, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how you can check to see if a missing person might
Yeah.
actually be dead is related
that's-
to checking those other.
It's all those resources and all those things that I refer to as a Rolodex, but it's all those, box checkings of, and no case and none of these cold cases are going to be the same. And it's a different solution or a variety of solutions each time that solves those. But the element that's the same in all of these is the community. And getting the community involvement and seeing the posters out there about a case from the 60s in Saratoga Springs. That's something that somebody here may see the visual poster, other people may prefer to see it on their cell phone, or may prefer to get an alert. So that variety of methods that is used by, law enforcement or the public, and the combination of our team here, each one of those plays an intricate part of that. But the community is a huge element of all of these cases, and it's about building that community bridge with this collaborative approach that helps solve these cases.
Go
A
ahead.
follow-up to my original question. If somebody is not reported missing through the law enforcement agency, and God forbid, they end up deceased, is the county coroner's office responsible for reporting that somewhere, so a match can be done with the missing person?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
So any unidentified body that's found by law is to be entered in NamUs. And the coroner's office is actually the entity, if you don't have a medical examiner, that authorizes access to NamUs under the New York State Executive Law. So for me to get access to NamUs, our coroner's office has to approve it, that we are authorized to investigate it.
That seems it would be best to have some sort of a match where all the local districts have to report to one place systematically, and then
Well,
there
they
be some
report
sort of a-
all the missing people get entered in the state system, state national database. But then when a body's recovered, if it's unidentified, it's required to be entered in this database.
But, so I think what you were saying is that it's just gonna be unresearched for as many years
Bingo.
as it takes until the body is found.
So I will say that, Toby and I have been working with one of the agencies that I work with to help with some of the unidentified human remains in their area. I don't know if that meeting happened yet, I can't remember what it was supposed to be, because I can't remember my meetings, much less hers. But NamUs is a really good resource, and we're starting to use that in a project that I keep looking up there, because she's one of the people who does it, related to kind of mapping these kinds of cases, both unsolved homicides, unidentified human remains, and missing persons, to be able to kind of do some analyses about, you know, where are these happening more often, during what times, what kind of people, what kind of characteristics, and using that as a way to try to think about, you know, how could we investigate these differently, or how can we prevent these things from happening when we see these kinds of patterns in New York State. And NamUs is one of our major resources for that information.
Thank you.
All right, time for one more question. No? Well, let's go chat about it. Thank you